At Christmas dinner, my daughter stood up and started handing out wrapped gifts to everyone sitting around the table. There were around 20 people, family and close friends. She smiled, hugged some people, cracked a few jokes, and even gave a little speech about how much everyone meant to her. I waited quietly. I was sitting at the end of the table. When she finished, I noticed she was done. There was nothing left in her hands. She hadn't given me anything. Not a card, not a box, not even a glance. I didn't say a word. Then she looked straight at me, smiled, and said loudly, "Some people just don't deserve gifts." Everyone at the table laughed awkwardly. I just sat there. "My name is Rodrigo Mendez." I didn't react. I didn't ask why. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there remembering the last 29 years and everything I did for her that she clearly didn't know, or chose to ignore. She had no idea where any of it came from. Since she turned 18, I paid for everything in her life, without ever putting my name on it. Her college tuition, rent, groceries, her insurance, even the $85,000 Audi she was driving outside. She always thought it was from her mom's side or her stepdad, Gabriel, who likes to take credit for things. I let her believe that. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted her to have a good life. But at that dinner, watching her tell everyone I never did anything for her, that I was just a useless father who never contributed, something shifted. She stood there telling people I was basically a burden, and the truth is, I had been the only one really providing for her the whole time, silently, every month, without ever missing a single payment or asking for anything in return. She said I was a failure, that I had never done anything meaningful for anyone. She smiled while saying it. Gabriel laughed and agreed. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I didn't try to defend myself in front of all those people. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and made a call. "Hey, Patricia. Yeah, freeze all distributions from the Mendez Family Trust to Victoria Mendez. Yes, immediately. Cancel all scheduled payments, credit cards, rent, insurance, car, everything, yes." "Thank you." I didn't even look at my daughter while I did it. I just pressed the button and placed my phone face down on the table. Nobody understood what was happening at first, but I knew what was coming. I had handled her finances for years. She just didn't know it, but she was about to find out. And everyone else at that table was too. Less than a minute after I ended the call, her phone started vibrating on the table. She looked at the screen and frowned. Another buzz. Another. Then one long alert. I sat still and watched. She picked up the phone and whispered, "Card declined." A few seconds later, she checked her banking app. "Rent unpaid," she said out loud, confused. Then, insurance canceled and car payment failed. She looked up at Gabriel. He looked just as confused. I kept my eyes on my glass of water. I didn't say anything. I didn't even flinch. She started typing, probably messaging her mom or the bank. More alerts popped up, one after the other. Her world, which she thought she built on her own, was starting to fall apart right there, in front of everyone. No yelling, no confrontation, just a phone call and silence. That's all it took. And nobody at the table said a word. People started looking at me. A few realized something serious was going on. Gabriel asked her what was happening, and she said her accounts were frozen. She was trying to call someone, but it wasn't going through. She kept refreshing her bank app. Then she looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. She asked, "Did you do this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Everything that was unfolding was already enough of a statement. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to finally come out. For almost 3 decades, I let her live thinking I was useless. I thought it would protect her, help her grow, give her peace. But she turned that silence into an excuse to erase me. So I stopped staying quiet. That's all I did. I stopped hiding what was always there. And when the money disappeared, so did everything she thought she built. She kept staring at her phone. Then she turned to the rest of the table and started saying I was having some kind of episode, that I was confused, that I didn't know what I was doing. She even tried to make it sound like I was lying. I still didn't speak. I let her talk. I let her dig the hole deeper. She told everyone that she paid for her own life, that Gabriel helped her learn everything about finances, that she worked hard and earned everything, that none of it ever came from me. Gabriel stood up and supported the story, said I was probably overwhelmed or having a breakdown. I sat there, listening, watching, remembering the $12,000 I sent her every month for 10 years, remembering every rent payment, every tuition bill, every vacation, every grocery run, all of it, paid for by me. While she stood there, still pretending I was never part of any of it. Everything that happened at that dinner, every lie she told, every smug comment, every laugh, led up to one moment. And I didn't need to scream, argue, or try to prove anything. I just had to stop hiding the truth. I watched her entire illusion fall apart through the screen of her own phone. Her credit cards, her rent, her car, her insurance, everything she thought she owned, was connected to something she never knew existed. Me. And when I took it back, she didn't know how to react. But it didn't start at that dinner table. It started 3 days before Christmas when she refused to pick me up because Gabriel's car didn't have room. That was the moment I realized exactly how invisible I had become to her. So I decided then that I wouldn't stay invisible anymore. Not on Christmas. Not after everything I had done. Not after everything she said. And definitely not in silence. The first sign that something wasn't right was when Julia told me she couldn't come pick me up. I had asked her earlier that morning if she could swing by on her way to the Christmas dinner. Her reply came through a short voice note. "Dad, just meet us there. Gabriel's taking the Audi and there's no space left." That was it. No apology. No effort to make it work. Just a quick brush off. Gabriel Martins was her stepfather, married to my ex-wife Adriana. He owned 2 Mercedes dealerships and always acted like he was better than everyone. Julia admired him like he was some kind of hero. I didn't argue. I grabbed my coat, got my keys, and headed to the garage. My Fiat Punto, a 2010 model with over 210,000 kilometers, was parked there like it always was. The air conditioning didn't work and the radio sometimes shut off on its own, but it still got me where I needed to go. I drove myself across the city, taking the same roads I had driven for years. Traffic was slow and I could feel the heat building up inside the car. I cracked the window to let some air in. At one point I saw the Audi pass me on the freeway. Brand new, shiny, tinted windows, perfect paint. I knew it was them. Julia used to love riding in my car when she was a little girl. Now apparently there wasn't even enough space for me. When I pulled up to the entrance of the country club, I could already see the line of luxury cars parked outside. BMWs, Range Rovers, a few Mercedes, of course. My car looked completely out of place. One of the valets came up to me and hesitated a bit before taking the keys. He tried to hide it, but I noticed the small smirk on his face, like he was thinking, "What is this guy doing here?" I stepped inside the building and everything looked like something out of a magazine. The lobby alone had more marble than I'd ever seen in one place. The lights were so bright it almost hurt my eyes. Staff dressed in black uniforms walked around with trays of champagne and little snacks I couldn't even identify. I followed the signs toward the main ballroom. There was this giant Christmas tree near the entrance, easily over 6 meters tall, covered in gold and red ornaments, ribbons and fake snow. At the base, there were boxes wrapped to look like gifts, probably just for decoration. I walked slowly, taking it all in, feeling like I didn't belong there. As I got closer to the tables, I heard Gabriel's voice. He was standing with a group of people, talking loudly, making jokes, and telling stories. "We spent a fortune decorating this place," he said, "but it's worth it for a proper holiday experience." I didn't stop to greet anyone. I just kept walking until I found the table with our name on it. Julia was already seated, right between Gabriel and Adriana. She was wearing a fancy black dress with shiny details. Later I found out it was a Gucci dress that cost nearly 15,000 Rs. She had posted about it on Instagram earlier that day with some caption like, "Holiday vibes with class." I pulled out the last empty chair at the table and sat down. Julia looked over, barely nodded, then went back to her phone. Gabriel was too busy talking to even notice me at first. Adriana gave me a quick glance, smiled politely, and returned to her conversation with the woman next to her. Nobody asked me how I was doing or even mentioned the fact that I had arrived alone. I poured myself a glass of water and stayed quiet. While waiting for the dinner to begin, I watched everyone talking, laughing, and taking photos. Julia kept adjusting her hair and checking her phone every few minutes, probably waiting for likes and comments. Gabriel seemed to be enjoying the attention he was getting from the other guests. He always had a way of talking about himself that made everything sound impressive. He mentioned the Christmas bonuses he gave his employees, the number of cars he sold that month, and how he got a special deal with some international supplier. Everyone nodded and laughed like it was fascinating. I just sat there, sipping my water and listening. At one point, Gabriel made a joke about people who drive cars held together by duct tape. A few people laughed. Julia smirked. I didn't say anything. I knew who the joke was aimed at. I kept my eyes on the tablecloth and waited for the food. Eventually, the waiters started bringing out the appetizers, small plates with complicated names and tiny portions. Julia took a photo of her dish before even picking up her fork. Gabriel ordered an expensive bottle of wine and made a big show about tasting it before letting the waiter pour it for the rest of the table. I kept to myself. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there because I was invited, or at least I thought I was. Sitting at that table, surrounded by luxury and people who acted like I didn't exist, I started realizing something. This whole setup wasn't really about family. It was about showing off. Julia didn't ask me to be part of it. She just tolerated me being there. The dress, the table, the photos, it was all for appearances. As I looked around the ballroom, I saw it clearly. I didn't belong in this version of her life. I was just a background detail. And that's how the night began. Julia hadn't picked me up. Gabriel drove the Audi, and there wasn't enough space. I arrived on my own in my old Fiat, parked it next to a fleet of luxury vehicles, and walked into a room that had nothing to do with me. The man at the door looked at me like I had made a wrong turn. The valet tried not to laugh at my car. Inside, it was marble floors, huge chandeliers, and decorations that probably cost more than my yearly income. Gabriel bragged about the cost of everything. Julia sat looking perfect in her designer dress, her phone always within reach. Nobody asked why I came alone. Nobody seemed to care, and that was just the beginning of the night. The first sign that something was off had come hours earlier, when my daughter, my own daughter, told me to meet them there because there wasn't room for me in their fancy car. "Dad," she said without even looking up from her phone. That was the first thing she said to me since I sat down at the table. No kiss on the cheek, no "how are you?" Nothing. Just that one word, thrown in my direction, while she kept scrolling or replying to messages or whatever it was she was doing. Her fingers were moving fast, and she smiled a little at something on the screen. I stayed quiet. I looked around the table. Gabriel was pouring wine for some of the guests. Adriana was talking to a couple seated next to her. Everyone seemed comfortable, like this was just another social event. The decorations were still catching everyone's attention, especially the tree in the middle of the hall. I tried to get Julia's attention again, maybe just with a look, but she didn't notice. She was fully into whatever was happening on that phone. So I leaned back a bit and waited for whatever would come next. Then came the toast. Gabriel stood up, holding his wine glass, and cleared his throat like he was about to give a speech at a wedding. Everyone turned to him automatically. He lifted his glass and smiled. "We just want to say how proud we are of Julia," he said, looking directly at her. She finally looked up from her phone and smiled like she had been waiting for this. She's 29 and completely independent. Built her own life with hard work and dedication. Everyone clapped. Julia nodded and tilted her head like it was nothing. Then Gabriel added, "With intelligence and good guidance." A few more smiles around the table. He went on to talk about a financial fund Julia's maternal grandfather had left for her and how responsible she had been with the money. Again, more applause. I stayed quiet. I took a small sip of water and stared at my plate. I knew exactly what was in that fund and who managed it, but I didn't say a word. Then Mrs. Isadora Braganza turned her head in my direction. She had known my grandmother many years ago. She looked surprised, maybe even a little uncomfortable. I think she remembered who I was and how close my side of the family used to be with Julia when she was younger. She didn't say anything out loud, but her eyes said enough. Right after that, Adriana looked at me and asked, "So, how's the job search going?" Her voice wasn't rude, but the timing felt off. Everyone at the table turned to me again. I nodded slowly and said, "Still looking. It's been 7 months since the layoff at the audit office. I've been through a bunch of interviews." I tried to keep it simple. No complaining, just facts. Then I added, "Most places tell me I'm overqualified." No one said anything for a second. Then Gabriel leaned in a bit and said, "Maybe it's time to accept something more modest." Julia nodded like that made perfect sense. I wanted to respond. I really did. But I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me defend myself. I just smiled a little and nodded. "Maybe," I said. I looked at Julia, hoping she'd say something to soften it, to add a word of support or even a joke to lighten the mood. But she didn't say anything. She just kept looking around, almost like she was bored now that the toast was done. I thought about all those years I spent working late nights so she could go to the best schools, have everything she wanted, and never hear no when she asked for something. That didn't matter anymore. All anyone saw now was a 52-year-old man, sitting at a table full of successful people, without a job, driving a car nobody respected, and apparently too proud to settle for something more modest. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my resume. I just stayed quiet and picked up my fork again. The food arrived soon after. Plates with small portions that looked like they came from a cooking show. Everyone started eating and going back to their conversations. I noticed a few people looking at me from time to time. Not with kindness, more like curiosity, maybe even a bit of pity. I didn't need their pity. I needed some peace. I watched Julia talk to the woman next to her, laughing and flipping her hair. The same woman who had just nodded when Gabriel suggested I should lower my expectations. I kept thinking about how many years I had been part of her life without needing any spotlight. I remembered the nights I stayed up organizing her college paperwork, handling her bills, calling the bank when things didn't go through. All of that silently. And now, she was here, smiling at a man who was telling her father to aim lower. And she agreed. That moment didn't hurt because of what was said. It hurt because of who didn't defend me. The rest of the dinner kept going like nothing had happened. More wine, more laughter, more photos. I stayed in my seat, eating slowly, thinking. Every few minutes someone would mention Julia's accomplishments, her new apartment, her stable life, her vision for the future. All things I knew I helped build. But apparently now they belonged to someone else's version of the story. Gabriel's version, Adriana's version, even Julia's. I was no longer a part of it. I was just the man who couldn't find a job and needed advice on settling. At one point, Julia raised her glass again to toast something else, and Gabriel smiled proudly at her. The applause returned. I stayed still. My phone was in my pocket. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Not yet. Everything was being said loud and clear. The second signal had come. During the toast, and I saw everything I needed to see right there in that room. I kept listening. I didn't interrupt, didn't make a sound. Julia nodded along as Gabriel and Adriana talked about how some people adapt to change and others get left behind. That's how they phrased it, like it was some deep wisdom. They said it loud enough for everyone to hear, but never directly to me. They were just having a conversation at the table, one that clearly had a target. Julia smiled, nodded, and even added a few comments of her own. It was like she was proud to agree with that version of life. The version where people like Gabriel were the example of success and people like me had failed to evolve. They had no idea what it took for her to have everything she did. And I never expected her to know, because I made sure she wouldn't. For years, I stayed out of sight when it came to money. No credit, no name on the transfers, just quiet support. But that moment at the table hit different. Her apartment alone cost 6,800 Rs a month. She drove a car worth nearly $500,000. Her closet was full of designer clothes. She traveled often. Europe, New York, Sao Paulo, beach resorts, all documented in stories and posts. None of it cheap. And she didn't know where the money really came from. She thought it came from Gabriel, from her mom's side of the family, from their supposed success. But every 15th of the month, for 127 straight months, I was the one transferring 12,000 rays into her accounts. I didn't miss a single month. Even when I was late on my own bills, even after the layoff, I made sure her lifestyle didn't change. I paid for her undergrad, her postgrad, the groceries, the bills, her credit card, her rent. I sent money for Christmas gifts, birthday dinners, flights, spa weekends, everything. She lived well, very well, and all of it came from me. But no one at that table knew it. That was the deal. During the divorce, Adriana suggested it. She said Julia needed stability, and it would be better if she thought the support came from her side of the family. She's too young to understand, she told me. Let her think it's from my dad's inheritance or from Gabriel. I agreed. Not because I trusted Adriana, but because I wanted Julia to feel secure. I didn't want her questioning things or getting caught between parents. I was still her father, even if I wasn't in the house anymore. So I said yes. I handled the money quietly. I built the system, set up the transfers, labeled the accounts in neutral names. Everything looked like it came from somewhere else. She never suspected, and I never said a word. I didn't want the applause. I just wanted her to be okay. That was the goal. That's what I told myself over and over, every time the money left my account. But now, sitting at that table, hearing Gabriel take all the credit, hearing Julia laugh and agree with his version of her success, it did something to me. Not just anger. It was deeper. I felt erased. I looked at her. In her expensive dress, hair done perfectly, nails manicured, shoes that probably cost more than my entire monthly budget. She didn't just look successful. She believed she had built it all herself. And worse, she believed Gabriel had guided her there. I watched her toast him, smile at him like he was the one who shaped her life, all while wearing clothes I paid for, sipping drinks in a club whose monthly fees I still covered. And not once did she glance in my direction. Not once did she acknowledge the years I had worked, saved, and sacrificed so she could have this life. That was when I looked down at the folder I had brought with me, the same one I had packed 3 nights ago. I had almost left it at home. It felt strange carrying it to a Christmas dinner, but something told me I might need it. The folder wasn't big, just a few sheets of paper, but every page had proof: bank transfers, receipts, account summaries, tuition payments, travel confirmations, rent deposits. Everything was documented. I never showed it to anyone before. I kept it for myself, partly for records, partly for protection. But now, seeing how comfortable they all were twisting the story, I felt my hand move toward it. I didn't take it out yet. I just rested my fingers on it, kept it closed on my lap under the table. I wasn't sure if I was going to use it, but for the first time, I felt like I had to. Not to expose her, not to embarrass anyone, but because I was tired of pretending none of it mattered. I kept looking at Julia, and she kept smiling like none of this had anything to do with me. She laughed at another one of Gabriel's jokes. It was some story about a client who couldn't afford a car but wanted to look rich. Everyone around the table laughed, Julia included. I stayed still, my hand on the folder. No one asked me to join the conversation. No one looked my way. The last time I felt that invisible was probably when I moved out of the house after the divorce. And even then, Julia still called me sometimes, still asked for help with small things. Her bike, her printer, moving furniture. Now it was like I didn't even exist. Not as a father, not as a man. Just a presence they tolerated for tradition. A seat filler. I thought about all the years I kept quiet, how hard I tried to stay out of the spotlight so Julia could shine. But the silence had grown heavy. And now, with everyone so sure of their version of the story, I stared at that folder and knew it wasn't going to stay closed much longer. The third sign was the hardest one to take. It was right after dessert, when everyone was getting more relaxed, chatting louder and laughing a little too much. Julia raised her glass again, tapping it lightly with her fork. "You know what I love the most about this Christmas?" she said, looking around like she had something big to share. Everyone got quiet. "It's learning the difference between people who build something and people who just exist." Then she turned her head slowly and looked straight at me. Some people create value. Others spend their lives being carried. Gabriel nodded right away. Exactly, he said, like they were finishing each other's thoughts. That one hit harder than anything else she'd said that night. It wasn't a joke or something thrown out without thinking. She meant it. She planned it. I didn't say a word. I just put my napkin down on the table, stood up calmly, and said I needed to use the bathroom. I walked slowly through the hall, past a few groups still standing and drinking near the bar. I didn't look at anyone. When I got to the bathroom, it was empty, thankfully. I stood in front of the mirror for a minute, just staring. The light in there was strong, way too bright. I looked tired. My beard hadn't been trimmed in weeks. My shirt was wrinkled, bought on sale at a department store. It didn't even fit right. My shoes were worn. I looked like a man who didn't belong in that club. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I had stayed quiet too long. Maybe I had let this version of the story go on for too many years. I asked myself, should I keep letting this happen, or was it time to speak up? I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of being erased. Tired of giving everything and being treated like I gave nothing. I splashed some water on my face, dried it, and went back out. When I got back to the table, Isadora was watching me. She didn't say anything, but her eyes stayed on me. I pulled out my chair and sat down. Julia was still talking, hands moving while she explained something to the woman on her right. Adriana had joined the conversation too, throwing in a few comments that made Julia laugh. Gabriel was relaxed, half leaning back in his chair, sipping his drink. No one even noticed I had left, or maybe they just didn't care. The rest of the table was engaged in their own small talks. A few of the guests had already started to check their phones. I sat there, hands in my lap, feeling like a ghost in a room full of people. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was the man they had pushed aside, the man Julia now saw as a burden. And the worst part was, I had helped create that image by staying silent for too long. That club wasn't just a fancy venue. It was a place full of people with status, business owners, lawyers, doctors, politicians. Everyone there cared about reputation. Everything was about image. Who you were with, what you wore, how you spoke. Being seen with the right people meant more than anything. That's why Julia loved it. That's why Gabriel fit in so well. And that's exactly why I looked out of place. I didn't talk like them. I didn't dress like them. I didn't have the right title or business card. To them, I was just the father. And quiet, laid off, fading into the background. Julia didn't just play along with that version, she helped write it. And tonight she decided to say it out loud. I watched her raise her glass again, laughing with confidence like she owned the room, like she had earned it all by herself. And I just sat there invisible, still trying to understand when I became the enemy. The thing that stuck with me the most was her saying she never asked anything from anyone. That's what she said, with a proud tone and her chin up, like it was a badge of honor. I kept my face still, but inside, I felt something break. She didn't know where her apartment came from. She didn't know how her trips were paid for. She never had to worry about late tuition or food or rent or car insurance. Everything was taken care of, quietly, by me, and that was the deal. I stuck to it. I let her believe she was building her own life, while I quietly covered the foundation. And now, hearing her speak like that, with so much pride in her independence, I realized she had no idea who really supported her, and if it was up to her, she would never find out. She didn't want to know, because if she knew, it would ruin the version of herself that she had created. She liked to believe she was self-made. That's what made it all so cruel. It wasn't just forgetting me. It was pretending I had never been part of the picture, that I was just someone who had existed in the background, while the real work was done by others. She erased me, and I let her. But now, sitting there with the folder still resting under my seat, I started to wonder how long I'd keep playing along. I looked at her, laughing at something Gabriel said, totally at ease. Wearing clothes I paid for, at a table I funded, surrounded by people who thought I didn't matter. That night, I didn't make a speech. I didn't stand up, I didn't call anyone out, but I made a decision. Watching her talk like that, so sure of herself, made me realize something had to change, and I was the only one who could start it. I looked down at the folder one more time and then back at her. The president of the club, Dr. Wagner, came over to our table. I'd seen his name before on some of the membership paperwork, but we had never spoken. He was a tall man, probably in his late 50s, wearing a perfectly ironed shirt with cufflinks that probably cost more than my entire outfit. He smiled politely and extended his hand. "Rodrigo, we haven't met yet," he said. "What line of work are you in?" Before I could even open my mouth, Julia cut in. "He's been out of a job for a while now," she said, like she was giving a weather update. Just flat, no hesitation. "Doctor." Wagner's grip loosened immediately, and his smile shifted. It wasn't rude, just distant now. I shook his hand anyway and forced a small smile. "That's right," I said quietly. I didn't bother adding details. I didn't feel like explaining my life to a man who clearly wasn't interested anymore. The air around the table got heavy. Adriana tried to keep the conversation going. "We were just talking about some changes in accounting standards," she said, turning toward Dr. Wagner. "The market is moving fast." Julia jumped in again, excited to show off what she thought she knew. "Yeah, Dad's problem is that he's too traditional. He never understood the modern market." She said it like she was joking, but her tone didn't sound like a joke to me. I didn't react. I just sat there, listening to my own daughter talk about me like I was a broken machine that couldn't keep up with the times. "Doctor." Wagner nodded politely, pretending not to notice the awkwardness. I looked at Julia's glass half full of wine and noticed how comfortable she was making me look small. I used to think she acted like that only around Gabriel, trying to impress him. But I realized she didn't need an audience anymore. It had become natural for her. Dismissing me had become easy. Then Isadora cleared her throat. "Rodrigo," she said, turning toward me. "Your grandmother was Dona Yolanda, right? I remember her very well. She was always so generous." I nodded. "Yes, that's her." Isadora smiled softly. "Didn't she leave you something significant when she passed?" Her question wasn't meant to be rude. She said it out of genuine curiosity. She had known my family for decades. But before I could answer, Julia let out a laugh. "If he had inherited anything, he wouldn't be like this now, right?" She pointed at my shirt, my shoes, my cheap watch. A few people at the table gave that kind of awkward smile people give when they don't know what to do. I didn't look at her. I looked down at my plate instead. I could feel my jaw tighten. That laugh, her laugh, didn't sound like my daughter's anymore. It was sharp, arrogant, almost cruel. And that was the moment I understood something important. If I kept staying quiet, she'd never learn anything about real value. I stayed silent and looked at Gabriel. He had started talking about investments again, his favorite subject. "Our portfolio has been doing great," he said proudly. "We've diversified everything. Real estate, stocks, fixed income. All balanced, performing perfectly." He spoke like he was giving a TED Talk. The others at the table nodded along. I stayed still. He didn't know that the same portfolio he bragged about was actually managed by me. Every strategy, every reallocation, every successful adjustment, it was my work. He had no idea. For years, I kept the management anonymous. He thought the reports came from a private firm, which technically they did, but I was the one behind it. When the returns came in strong, he'd talk about how smart he was with money. I never corrected him. It didn't matter back then. But now, hearing him talk about his performance while my daughter laughed at me, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Then someone asked who handled their investments. It was one of the older men at the table, trying to be polite. "Who manages your assets, Gabriel?" he asked. Gabriel smiled confidently. "It's a private family office," he said, like it was a secret reserved for the wealthy. I looked at him and almost laughed. A private family office. That's what he called me now. I remembered the night he asked for help, when he didn't even know how to read a balance sheet. He was desperate back then, trying to save his business from collapse. I helped him because of Julia. I didn't want to see her go through financial instability. I spent weeks fixing his messes. I turned his accounts around, invested properly, and gave him a plan that saved everything. And now here he was, taking all the credit. I thought about how easy it had been for him to build his image using my work, just like it had been easy for Julia to build her independence using my money. The conversation went on like nothing happened. Julia ordered another drink. Gabriel kept talking about market trends, and Adriana smiled proudly, like she had raised a genius and married a financial expert. Dr. Wagner listened but wasn't really paying attention anymore. I could tell he had lost interest the moment Julia called me unemployed. That's how it worked in places like that. Status first, respect second. I stayed quiet and watched them. Every word they said, every laugh, every fake compliment. I didn't belong there, but not because I wasn't good enough. I didn't belong there because they didn't deserve what I had given them. They had built their image on something that wasn't theirs, on me. I looked down at my hands, thinking about the years of work, the nights spent building the trust fund, the years I managed their finances. And all of it, every part of it, carried one name, mine. Not some private family office, not Gabriel's, mine. But they had no idea. And for now, I let them keep believing that lie. Julia started talking about how she was finally debt-free. She sounded proud, like someone who had climbed out of a hole all by herself. She mentioned that Gabriel had taught her how to invest, how to manage her money properly, and how to make smart decisions with her finances. She made it sound like she'd always had this level of control over her life. Everything I have today, she said, came from discipline and hard work. I stayed quiet, listening. She talked with so much confidence that a few heads at the table started nodding. Then Dr. Wagner, still seated with us, turned his attention back to me. "And what about you, Rodrigo? Any plans coming up?" he asked. It was a simple question, probably meant to include me in the conversation. But before I could even say a single word, Julia jumped in again. "He's always been a dreamer," she said with a quick laugh. Adriana nodded like she had heard that 1,000 times before. Julia looked around like she was about to give a TED Talk. "Some people build value," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "Others just consume it." Then she paused and looked right at me. "My father, for example." She didn't flinch when she said it. She didn't soften her voice. She started listing everything, like she had been waiting for this moment. Unemployed, no property, drives an old car, buys cheap clothes. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Cold, clear, public. The entire table fell quiet. Even people at other tables seemed to be paying attention now. The waiters near us stopped what they were doing for a moment. The room didn't feel festive anymore. I sat still, looking straight ahead. I didn't interrupt. I didn't stop her. I just let her keep going. I wanted to hear exactly how far she was willing to take it. Every word she said erased more of what I had spent years building for her. "I'm independent," she added. "I have my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I've never needed help from anyone." She said it like a badge of honor, like she had never been handed anything, like she had started from zero and built her world from scratch. I looked at her, trying to understand who this person was. This wasn't just ignorance, it was denial. She wasn't mistaken. She was rewriting the truth. And the worst part was that people believed her. They looked at her confidence, her expensive clothes, the way she spoke, and they assumed she must be telling the truth. No one knew that her apartment's rent was paid by me, that the car she drove was still in my name, that every so-called independent trip she took had been booked on a card I paid for. I didn't say anything. I just watched her talk. I looked at Gabriel too. He didn't stop her. He looked proud, like he'd coached her for this. I took a sip of water and asked calmly, "Are you done?" She turned to me, surprised I had spoken at all. "Just being honest," she replied. She sat back in her chair like her job was finished. She thought this was the part where I would shrink further, where I would just nod and keep eating in silence like I had done all night. But I didn't. I reached down and pulled my folder from under my chair. A simple black folder, nothing fancy. I placed it gently on the table right next to my plate. I saw Isadora's eyes widen immediately. She recognized it. Maybe from court, maybe from something Adriana had mentioned years ago. The others leaned in slightly, trying to understand what was going on. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I placed both hands on the table and looked at Julia. "Before we keep going," I said, "I think everyone here deserves to know the actual facts." The entire room seemed to pause. The folder had everything: bank transfers, monthly statements, tuition invoices, international wire receipts, car payments, apartment deposits, grocery bills, and even screenshots of text messages with Adriana. 12 years of quiet transactions, always on time, always from my accounts. I had printed each year separately and organized them in labeled tabs. There were receipts of vacations Julia had taken, all booked with my credit card. There were statements showing the automatic monthly transfer of 12,000 Rs straight into her account for over a decade. There was even a document showing I'd paid Gabriel's dealership loan once, just to avoid ruining Julia's lifestyle. It was all there, in black and white. I looked at the people around the table, one by one. I didn't need to yell. The facts spoke louder than anything I could say. The image Julia had created was starting to crack. She looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. Her smile faded just a little. Gabriel looked nervous for the first time that night. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't throw accusations. I didn't even open the folder yet. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch. Everyone else was waiting. Julia looked uncomfortable now. Adriana was trying to read the labels on the side of the folder without making it obvious. Isadora kept glancing between me and Julia. The same daughter who just minutes ago said she had never needed help was now face to face with 12 years of help, fully documented, laid out for anyone to see. I had never wanted credit. That was never the point. But at that moment I realized that staying silent had allowed a lie to grow. A lie that now stood in front of me in designer heels and a rented smile. I looked back at Julia. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done carrying everything while being told I was worth nothing. So I said again calmly, "Let's continue, but from here on, everyone deserves the truth." Then I opened the folder. My phone started vibrating on the table. I looked at the screen. It was my financial manager. The monthly transfer had just gone through, right on schedule. I stared at it for a second. Then I placed the phone face up in the middle of the table so everyone could see the caller ID. "Perfect timing," I said. I reached down, grabbed the black folder from my lap, and placed it next to the phone. "Let's talk about that fund." Julia froze. She didn't understand at first. "The fund from Grandpa?" she said quickly, almost as if rehearsed. Gabriel nodded, pretending he was part of the conversation. "Yes, the inheritance fund. It's all from her grandfather's side." I looked at him. "Really?" I asked. "Do you know the original amount?" Silence. No one said anything. I leaned back slightly. "What about the returns, the distributions, the managing structure?" Still nothing. Julia glanced at Gabriel, looking for help. His confident face was gone. I picked up the phone and answered the call. I hit the speaker button. "Hello, Patricia," I said. "Could you confirm something for me, please?" The room went quiet. Everyone could hear her voice. "Of course, Mr. Mendez." I spoke slowly, clearly. "Can you tell me the name of the beneficiary for the Mendez Family Trust?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Beneficiary, Julia Mendez." A few gasps around the table. "And who authorized the transfers?" I asked. "All transfers are approved and executed by you, Mr. Mendez, as the sole authority on the account." The words filled the room. Julia blinked rapidly, her hand gripping her wine glass. "And the average monthly amount?" I continued. 12,000 Rs, Patricia said without hesitation. I could see the confusion in Julia's eyes turning into panic. Gabriel had stopped pretending to smile. He looked down at the table, his face shiny with sweat. "Thank you, Patricia," I said. "Please stay on the line for one more request." Julia tried to speak. "Dad, this doesn't make sense," she said. Her voice was shaky, but she was still trying to sound calm. "You must be mistaken." I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I opened the folder. The papers inside were neatly organized. Bank statements, receipts, and documents that covered years of payments. "It makes perfect sense," I said, flipping the first few pages toward her. "Here, 12,000 reais every month. Rent, car, insurance, card bills, vacations. Every single thing you claim to have paid for yourself. I slid the papers across the table. She didn't touch them. Here's your car payment, I said. Here's the transfer for your apartment. She looked at them, then looked at me, pale. This can't be right, she whispered. It is, I said. And that's not all. I pulled out one last document, the notarized copy of my grandmother's will. I placed it in front of Isadora. Would you mind reading the section marked in red? Isadora adjusted her glasses and began reading aloud. Her voice was steady. All assets, including the Mendez family trust, shall remain under the full control and discretion of my grandson, Rodrigo Mendez, who may continue or suspend distributions at his own judgment, especially in cases of disrespect, negligence, or ingratitude. She stopped reading and looked at me. So the authority is yours completely. I nodded. Julia covered her mouth with her hand. Adriana stared down at the tablecloth. Gabriel didn't move. The truth was sitting right there in front of them, printed, dated, and signed. The fund everyone thought came from somewhere else. Gabriel's business, the grandfather, luck, had always been mine. Every cent. I watched Julia's expression change from denial to realization. She understood it now. The apartment, the trips, the life she bragged about. It all existed because I had chosen for it to exist. And in that moment, she realized I could choose for it to end. I turned back to the phone. Patricia, I said, please proceed with the suspension of all distributions to the beneficiary, effective immediately. Cancel any automatic payments, including rent, credit cards, and insurance. There was a pause on the line. Understood, Mr. Mendez, she said. All distributions will be frozen immediately. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Julia shook her head. Wait, she said, her voice breaking a little. You can't just… I cut her off. I can, I said calmly. It's my right, and it's done. Patricia confirmed it again. Everything has been suspended. I thanked her and ended the call. I set the phone down next to my plate. Nobody said a word. The only sound in the room came from Julia's phone vibrating over and over. Notifications were popping up one after another. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide. Gabriel leaned over to look and his face turned white. She started scrolling through her phone, her hands shaking. Payment declined, she read out loud. Credit card blocked, automatic rent transfer failed, insurance canceled. Each new alert hit harder than the last. I sat there, silent, watching her realize what had just happened. Gabriel grabbed his napkin and wiped his forehead. This must be some mistake, he said, his voice weak. I didn't respond. I had said everything that needed to be said. Julia looked at me, her lips trembling. Dad, please, she whispered. We can fix this. I kept my eyes on her, calm. You said you never needed my help, I reminded her. Now you'll see what that really means. She didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again. Another failed transaction. I leaned back in my chair, my hands resting on the folder. I had never raised my voice. I hadn't insulted anyone. All I did was tell the truth, and for the first time that night, the truth was louder than all their lies. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Isadora finally stood up slowly, gave me a small nod, and walked away. The others pretended to check their phones, trying to avoid looking at me or Julia. Adriana looked stunned, maybe even embarrassed. Gabriel sat there frozen, staring at his empty glass. Julia's phone buzzed again, one last time before she turned it face down on the table. Her shoulders dropped. Dad, she started to say, but the words didn't come out. I didn't answer. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and closed it. The truth was out. There was nothing more to explain. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked at her one last time. Next time you talk about value, I said quietly, remember where yours came from. Then I walked away from the table, leaving the silence behind me. Her phone buzzed one more time as I stepped toward the door. Julia was staring at her phone, not blinking, just reading the notifications popping up one after another. Car payment declined, one said. Rent transfer failed, said another. Credit card blocked, came the next. She looked like she couldn't believe it was real. Her thumb hovered over the screen, then she scrolled again and more alerts kept coming. Gabriel leaned in, saw the screen, and quickly took the phone from her hand. He didn't say a word. He just kept looking at the screen with a stunned expression. Adriana looked completely frozen. She hadn't said a thing since the call ended. I glanced around. The whole room had gone quiet. Nobody was eating. Even the waiters had stopped moving. I looked down at my phone and saw a message from the bank manager confirming that the block had gone through. Everything had been suspended. I called her back right there and asked her to send full printed statements to the club. Dr. Wagner confirmed the mailing address himself. I ended the call and placed my phone on the table again. The silence felt heavier now. Every person at the table had their eyes on me, including Julia. Her hands were clenched on her lap, her breathing getting uneven. She wasn't hiding it anymore. "You can't do this," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, Dad, you can't just take everything away like this." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the folder again and pulled out the document she clearly hadn't read before. My grandmother's will. I slid it across the table to Isadora. She looked at me, then adjusted her glasses and began reading it slowly. "Distributions may be suspended in cases of confirmed ingratitude by the beneficiary," she read aloud. Her voice was steady, and every word hit the table like a stone. Gabriel sat back in his chair and crossed his arms. Then he leaned forward and said, "Look, we didn't mean to disrespect you. Maybe we can talk this through." I looked at him but didn't respond. I didn't need to say anything. Everything I had done so far was clear. Julia's phone buzzed again. She didn't even try to pick it up this time. "Your BMW is being returned to the dealer," I said flatly. "Your insurance policy is canceled. In 30 days, your lease will be terminated. Without rent, you'll be evicted." She shook her head like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. No, Dad, please," she whispered, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "The card," I continued, "is closed. All benefits are now suspended." She covered her face with her hands and started crying harder. No one said anything. Even Gabriel stopped pretending to be in control. He looked down at the table. I pulled out the final page of the will and held it up. "There's one last clause," I said. "It might interest you." They all looked up. I pointed to the part in bold. "In the event of sincere regret and genuine change of behavior," I read, "the fund may be reviewed and reinstated at the sole discretion of the trustee." That was me. I watched Julia's reaction. She wasn't speaking anymore. She was just crying quietly, her makeup smudged, her shoulders shaking. Adriana still looked frozen, like she didn't know what to say or how to fix anything. Gabriel tapped Julia's shoulder, but she didn't even look at him. Everyone was stuck, and for the first time in years, I wasn't. I had spent too long paying for a version of reality where no one gave me credit, where everything I did was invisible. That version ended now. I closed the folder, tucked the papers inside, and stood up slowly. I pushed my chair in and looked down at Julia one more time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to make a speech. I just said what needed to be said. "When you're ready," I told her calmly. "You know where to find me." She didn't answer. She just sat there with her hands covering her face. I gave one last look around the table, nodded politely to Dr. Wagner and Isadora, then turned around and started walking toward the exit. Behind me, the room stayed quiet. No one tried to stop me. No one asked questions. No one defended her. Everyone had seen the truth laid out in black and white. I didn't need applause or recognition. I didn't even want it. I just wanted clarity. And I had given that to all of them. As I walked out of the hall, I heard another buzz from Julia's phone, probably another notification. But I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Right before I stepped out of the restaurant, I heard her voice behind me. "Dad!" she shouted. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. I reached the parking lot and got into my old car. As soon as I closed the door and turned the key, my phone started ringing. It was her. I let it ring. Then it rang again. This time it was Adriana, then Gabriel. The calls didn't stop. In just a few minutes, I counted 17 missed calls. I looked through the windshield at the restaurant. From where I sat, I could see through the large glass windows. There was a mess at the table now. Julia was yelling into her phone, waving her arms like she was losing control. Gabriel was standing, talking fast, trying to calm her down. Adriana was still sitting, both hands on her face. Even from outside, I could tell they were panicking. My phone buzzed again, another call. I let it go. The calls turned into messages, one after another. My screen lit up non-stop. I didn't open them right away. I sat there for a moment, watching that same table where, just a short while ago, I had been the quiet one. Now they were the ones lost in confusion. Finally, I picked up the phone and looked. "Dad, please don't let them take the car," one message said. "I can't lose the apartment," came another. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean any of it." The texts kept coming in waves. I drove home without replying. I parked in the same spot I always did, walked upstairs to my apartment and sat on the couch. I didn't feel angry. I wasn't sad either, just still. I turned off the phone. No more buzzing, no more apologies. I turned on the TV, watched the news in silence for a while, then went to bed early. The next morning I woke up before the alarm. I made my usual coffee, sat by the small table in the kitchen, and finally turned my phone back on. It started buzzing immediately. Dozens of new messages and a few voicemails. I opened the audio folder and pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, shaking and breathless. "Dad, please talk to me. I don't know what to do. I was stupid. I went too far. Please, I'm sorry. You have to believe me." The next one was quieter but still full of panic. "I can't lose everything. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't mean any of it, I swear." I sat there sipping my coffee, listening to all of it. No fast forward, just listening, message after message. Her voice sounded nothing like the version of her from the night before. All that certainty, that arrogance, it was gone now. This was someone who had finally hit a wall. After breakfast, I sat down at my desk and opened my computer. My inbox was full. I hadn't checked it in a few days. There were messages from recruiters, invitations to job interviews, and even 2 offers to join corporate boards. Apparently, a few people at the dinner were more observant than I thought. A message from Dr. Wagner popped up too. He asked if we could set up a meeting about the financial committee at the club. He said they were looking to bring in someone experienced to lead strategy and oversight. I replied, said I'd be available to meet the following week. Then I went through a few more emails, answered some, and deleted others. I wasn't in a rush. There was no urgency. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to catch up. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just moving forward on my own time. The next few weeks passed quietly. I stayed busy with a few consulting projects that had been pending, went to the gym a few mornings, read a book I'd left half-finished for over a year. Every now and then, another message from Julia would come in. Sometimes it was short, just please. Other times long and emotional. I didn't block her, I just didn't answer. One afternoon, the bank called to confirm the complete deactivation of all linked services on her side. They wanted verbal confirmation that no payments should resume. I gave it. Then I hung up and went for a walk. It was strange how peaceful everything felt. No drama, no stress, no need to explain myself to anyone. I knew that eventually she'd stop trying to reach me out of desperation and maybe reach out with understanding. But I wasn't waiting for it. If it came, it would have to come the right way. 3 weeks after that dinner, I was home on a Saturday afternoon, folding laundry and listening to music when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw her. Julia. She wasn't dressed like usual. No designer bag, no expensive sunglasses, no makeup. Just regular jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. She looked like someone who hadn't slept. I opened the door slowly. She didn't say anything right away. She just stood there, holding a small white envelope in her hand. "I wrote something," she said, her voice low. "I don't expect anything. I just want you to read it." I didn't say anything. I took the envelope, nodded once, and she turned around and walked away. No begging, no performance, just silence. I closed the door and stood there holding the envelope. Then I went to the kitchen table and sat down. It was time to read.